you. Do we know how we're supposed to sit? Have a preference? I don't know.
Well, good morning.
Wherever you want. I have no idea.
I know we just took a minute and a half, but whenever I have the chance to speak, to open my mouth and let words come out, I always try to center myself in the hope and prayer that my words add value. And so I want to thank you for being present, for bringing yourselves, and I want to thank this dynamic panel here that has joined me in what I believe will be a very timely and powerful discussion about healing. Building loving communities, bridging divides, is really about healing. And I don't think I have to tell you, we could sure use that now. There is so much hate and pain that has been weaponized, and so many wedges of division that it can be hard to imagine what different looks like. We're going to take that on, and through our perspectives and experiences and lived journeys, share some thoughts around what it means to build loving communities and to bridge divides. And as Sarah and my dear brother Owsley mentioned, if y'all have heard me say anything over the past few years, you've probably heard this phrase, from the hood to the holler. Matter of fact, from the hood to the holler. There you go. Well, that is so much more than just a slogan or branding that folks wear on hoodies. I believe it is at the heart of why I live today. It is at the center of my why. And my why is my family. You all are my family. And the journey of figuring out how to love myself, how to stand up for my community, like it was mentioned in my bio. And it was funny, I actually clapped when I heard the bio because I'm like, oh, that's about me. That just lets you know how good God is. But all of my family come in from the West End of Louisville, and I always say that we weren't poor. We had too much faith, too much love. To ever say the word poor, didn't even know what that meant until college, when I realized, we actually are poor because we ain't have any money. And being pissed off about these lived experiences because, I see my mom, she's my super shero, she's incredible, she's hardworking. Why are we struggling the way that we're struggling? It led me on a journey to be about solutions, which again was at the heart of me loving myself, loving my family, loving my community. And it led me across Kentucky. This guy from 35th and Market, crisscrossing the Commonwealth of Kentucky, going into spaces that are called sundown towns, where there are still Confederate flags to this day, Kentucky, talking about love and humanity and family and what I'm fighting for. And, when your house is on fire, it takes some courage to actually get up and run through that fire and to save yourself or to put the fire out. That courage and that sense of urgency is why I do what I do. It's why I show up the way I show up. And once I realized that government was at the center of so many of the problems we face through policies and budgetary decisions, I determined I was going to get in the middle of all of that and cause as much good trouble as I could. And you know what? As I started going across Kentucky, determined to build coalitions to help support my community in the West End of Louisville, I realized, wait a minute. The same things I'm fighting for my family, you're fighting those battles too. The same trauma that I deal with, I see that in you. And I was a director of Fish and Wildlife. This is where it really came to fruition for me. So, you see me here. Young black guy, well, I ain't as young as I used to be, but at that time I was younger, and I was a director of Fish and Wildlife, and there were about 700 employees altogether when you include seasonal and temp. 3 black people, and I was the only director. So every room I go in, I get the looks, I get the questions. There were blogs, called me the names that you know they called me. But I was the director. I signed the paycheck, so they had to listen to me. And the values of family, of community, of loving one another, I brought that into this space because that's all I know. And so when I would talk to Fish and Wildlife employees, workers, dedicated Kentuckians, I would open up and share my story. And when we did that, we found common bonds. And when we found those common bonds, we realized our connection as family. And then we decided to work together. I know that still works. I still believe in it. And I think we saw a really good dose of it a little over a week ago on November 7th. We need to see a whole lot more of it, though. And so when I had this realization that, wait a minute, we're connected, I determined that if we're going to ever change anything in Kentucky, in this country, if we're ever going to end generational poverty, if we're ever going to uproot structural racism, we're going to have to do it together. And the only way you come together in truth is through love. Love is the glue. It's that force that compels you to be your best, that compels you to see outside of yourself. And I know that we have the ability to lean into that. And while you're here listening to us today, I hope that you would charge yourself to ask yourself, how can I love myself better? Because that's where it starts. How can I love my neighbors better? How can I put love into action? And there are divisions. Look, if we took time to go across the room, lift up any issue, and I've heard about some of the discourse earlier today, very powerful discussions that are happening, you're going to find a lot of disagreement on everything. Disagreement can be healthy, and it is necessary. But we have to still be able to see the humanity in one another. We have to remember that even if we disagree, we're in this daggone thing together. I ain't cuss. We have to remember that. And I remember the exact moment. It was divine. It was like the skies parted. I was on an Eastern Kentucky tour going across Appalachia, and so I was running for U.S. Senate in 2020. I am an absolute underdog. I'm going up against one of the most well-funded Senate campaigns in history, and I knew we could beat it because I understand the power of people. So I determined I'm going to go to the exact parts of Kentucky where all the smart people say, don't even waste your time. They're not going to support you, and hey, have you looked in the mirror? You're black, sir. Don't go there. My response to that was, nah, that's my family. And family shows up for one another. And so I went. And this is the first time I really learned about hollers. As we're going down windy roads, and I'm seeing homes that look like they in Russell, abandoned lots, couches in the front yard, roofs caving in. I'm thinking, man, there's a house like that up the street from my mom. And I start canvassing, knocking on doors to talk to folks, telling them why I'm here, that I think we deserve clean water. I think we should be able to have health care. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've rationed my insulin. Nobody should have to do that. And you know what? When I started talking about humanity, regardless of what the party was, I knocked on doors, had Trump signs, I got pictures to prove it. The response was overwhelmingly the same. One, it was, thank you for caring enough to even come talk to me because nobody talks to me. And then it was, man, I want the same thing. You know, our lights are cut off. because we trying to get our medicine and we couldn't afford both. I'm saying this to say there is still room to build community because we are still in it together. And when that light bulb went off for me, I was like, you know what? We got to define this the right way. So I grew up in the church. Both my parents are ministers, and there's like call and response. That's where from the hood to that's that energy. And we're leaving Letcher, we're going down the pike, we crisscrossing. I was like, we got to capture this so people can feel what this is. We got to take this message from Pike to the Purchase. That's where I started. I'm hitting the alliteration on the P's. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think that hits hard enough. I don't want to make it feel just so central on any specific location. How do we describe this? And when I was up in the holler saying, man, that looks like a house on my mom's block, I was like, that's it. We're going to take this message from my hood to their holler to everywhere, that we are in this together. And if we lean on each other and if we love on each other, we're going to win together. And you all saw the things that transpired, all the history and big things that were done and the work that continues. I understand something that I think you see too, which is why you're here, is that in the times of crisis, in times of pain, what do? To me, you go to the safe space. And my proposition for us as Kentuckians, as human beings, is that we build safe spaces everywhere, which is essentially strong, thriving communities. And you do that by seeing the humanity in others, calling out injustice, speaking up for truth, and extending an arm, extending a hand, extending your heart. And my heart is really heavy right now because of what's going on in the world. There are so many people that feel invisible. We can be the remedy to that by shining our light, by being the example of kindness, the example of compassion, and the example of urgent action to bend the arc, that arc of the moral universe, toward justice, which is really at the core, just love in action. So I'm looking forward. Look, that's worth an applause. Whoever that was putting you on the spot. I'm looking forward to this discussion today because we have creative energy, we have organizing, we have truth in activism, we have executive excellence. We're going to really cover the gamut here in a discussion of building, loving communities, and bridging divides. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so the first person that gets to pour some love out on you all is someone who, as soon as I saw you, I just knew you were dope. And I look forward to building a connection with you and learning more about your art. But I'm excited for you to share it with folks here today. Let me read your bio. I think this is the abbreviated one. Kiana, she uses she, they pronouns, is a vocalist, radio host, and educator hailing from the valleys of Carrollton, Kentucky. She uses music to tell the story of our complex humanity and to foster a safe space for others to create freely without the barrier of judgment. She is the engagement manager for music education at 90.5 WUOL afternoon, host at Louisville Public Media by day, and can be found performing her own music with her band Kiana and the Sun Kings by night. Kiana demonstrates activism by dedicating her time to local arts nonprofits that she believes are stirring up good trouble, because that's what we need. This includes sitting on multiple boards, including the Fund for the Arts, Director of Communication for the Louisville Jazz Initiative, and current Hatley Creatives Program Coordinator. Kiana strives to continue wearing the importance of community and connection into her music making. Kiana, share a little bit about your work and how we build loving communities.
Good morning. Come on now, y'all. I'm an educator. Good morning. It's an honor to share space with you today. As Charles said, my name is Kiana Dell. I'm an educator, a radio host, a performer, a space maker, and my very first form of communication, a vocalist. So I'm going to first connect with you in the only way my soul knows how. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say. I'd say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole round world to hear. Oh, thank you. These words were written by lyricist Dick Dallas, with music by jazz musician Billy Taylor. But most notably, this tune was popularized by Nina Simone in 1967 and became an anthem for the civil rights movement at the time. I encourage you to ruminate on that in our time together this morning. When we talk about building a bridge, bridging a divide, we must first talk about the river of exclusion that lies below it. We must talk about liberation through equity to build that bridge, brick by brick. It will be time-consuming and at times frustrating. It will be discouraging and defeating, but you always have to remember why you started putting those bricks in place to begin with. I want to tell you a bit about myself to contextualize why I feel the call to do this work. I was born in a rural Kentucky farm town in the 90s. Yet social norms were nearly non-existent behind the walls of my house. My mother was the head of the household. We were upper middle class. It was a two-parent, loving, functioning home. I want to say the circumstances of my upbringing were both fortunate and, in ways, unfortunate. Fortunately, this meant that I've only ever known divides by staring across a fissure and plotting how to get to the other side. It never occurred to me that there would be people out there intentionally placing obstacles in my path. I was never taught to take no for an answer. Whenever I saw a door opening for someone else, I found myself, again, scheming on why I couldn't just walk through the very same door. After all, it was already open. I mean, can't you just hold it for me? Unfortunately, this meant that the reasons why that door couldn't be held open for me were lost on me for a large part of my life. I was unaware of the weight of my blackness and my gender behind those walls. I had to learn slowly and painstakingly that I would be carving out my own path and pulling up my own seat at the table for the next several years. As soon as I stepped foot outside of those walls, and although I'm positive it happened sooner, as early as elementary school, I remember seeing it and feeling it. And as a coping mechanism, I created a stage persona of myself. I had to play a character to move through the world and to perform on their stages because I had just become acutely aware of my place within the world. And that version of me was strong and fearless and already famous. I never questioned why the door was closed because my status and talent had opened it for me. Eventually, that persona of Kiana Dell and the Kiana Dell standing in front of you right now merged and morphed into the person you see. Not because of my status and talent, well, okay, maybe in part my talent, but because I started intentionally engaging with the local community through arts experiences. Moving through those experiences left me wondering why I rarely saw people who looked like me reflected back at me. In fact, it became apparent that these larger organizations viewed us as other, as an entity outside their own to be helicoptered into and helped. It left me wondering how to get in contact with the person holding the keys, or better yet, how to become the person who holds the keys. To become the person holding the keys, you must first be a source of support. Go to the gallery openings, to the performances, to the book release, to the restaurant, revise the paper, not to elevate your own position, but to simply show up. There is a literal meaning to the phrase, "it takes a village," and it's these small acts of love and service that build loving communities. They say, be the change. No one else was going to open that door for me, so I ensured it was open for all of the little Kianas after me, for the next generation of musicians, educators, space makers. Bridging divides first starts with examining your surroundings and asking if every part of them feels accessible. Now, there are those of you who may always see yourselves represented, as the world has been built to cater to you specifically, and if that's the case, ask yourself the opposite question. Why do I see an overwhelming amount of myself in this? What can I learn? This work is a pursuit. Today, that work manifests in several different places. Within these arts nonprofits, in my day job as an educator and host at 90.5 WUOL, our local classical station, on stage and with my band, Kiana and the Sun Kings. I lead with an approach that I learned from studying jazz. Now, jazz is a music born out of oppression as a method of resistance. Its roots, the blues, communicate the complexities of our humanity. These mediums are, at their core, collaborative and community reliant. You can't make good jazz in complete solitude or without considering the heart and the history of the music. It feeds off of a sharing of souls, of minds, and experiences. Although music is so communal and so universal, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that river of exclusion first. Both classical music and jazz are now widely learned in an academic setting and in higher education spaces. That's barrier to access number one. Then, outside of the classroom, they're often performed in spaces like the very one we're in today, with ticket prices higher than what the average music lover can afford. That's barrier to access number two. Those two things alone would discourage someone who does not have a college degree or formal training from stepping foot into the concert hall. From jump, they feel unworthy. The first time I decided to start creating more equitable spaces was when someone approached me and said they couldn't attend a Sun Kings concert because they weren't smart enough. I was gutted. Music should never be a vehicle for elitism. The idea that you need an expensive degree or an accolade to play jazz is the antithesis of its mission. Classical music has a very different story. It was born a white European medium that Black and brown people, especially women, were condemned from playing for a long time. Us taking up space in classical music, becoming hosts and playing, writing, and interpreting this music, that in and of itself is a radical act, and will continue to dismiss those European classical norms and rewrite them. So to building a bridge. When asked how we've completely changed and grown 90.5 WUL's listenership by 45%, how to make classrooms more equitable, exactly how to build safe spaces for musicians to create freely without the barrier of judgment. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but in short, there's a three-step answer for that. One, if you're setting out to serve a certain community, the LGBT community, the Black community, young students, do not helicopter in with your ideas and what you perceive to be helpful. Talk to them. What have they been missing? What do they need? And what resources can you provide? Start there. 2, become that source of support. Show up for people and really show up as an active participant, an active listener. You are the student. And finally, identify all perceivable barriers to access and remedy as many as you are able. Is your venue ADA accessible? Is there a transcript for your podcast? Is the cast or the playlist on your station representative of its listeners? Brick by brick. And there have been times, even in our recent history, that those bricks had to be used to break a window. Resistance, too, builds a bridge. When you can, build that bridge by supporting your community. Get curious and see the humanity around you. I'd like to leave you with words from musician John Batiste's Stay Human project. This is a bit of call and response for you. Repeat after me, please. I feel good.
I feel good.
I feel free.
I feel free.
I feel fine just being me.
I feel fine just being me.
I feel good today.
I feel good today.
Feel so good today.
Feel so good today.
Thank you.
See what I mean? So, I told you, we're gonna, I hope will lift your spirit, will charge you. I'm excited for the next 2 incredible people that I get to introduce as we make it through this. That's my biggest privilege, I get to introduce y'all. I wanted to punctuate something that Kiana stressed. 1, thank you for sharing your journey of self-reflection and awareness. I think as you're looking to create loving communities and bridge divides, again, you have to see yourself. You have to understand your agency and humanity so that you can be of any service to anyone else. And then it's the journey of understanding your surroundings and creating space. Art and creativity is a powerful tool to create that space, to create community and space for people to come together. And so I hope, again, that you will ask yourself, how can I create more space? And then how can I use myself to be a force for good? And one big point that you raised, where if y'all saw my head nodding, is if you're looking to build community, and if you're looking to be an ally, the solution is within us. So you don't have to come into a problem thinking you're going to solve it for someone. That's not what community is. It's centering a listening spirit, being present, seeing humanity, and then figuring out how you can add value to someone else so that we can build the solution together. And I could tell you some stories about how that has worked in the West End, and I'm excited that we have someone who has done it well for the West End and all of Louisville, who is soon to come a little bit later in the program, Judge. But up next, I get the privilege of introducing someone who I'm gonna spend the weekend with pretty much. Sorry about that, Baylen. Baylen Campbell is the Director of Community Impact for Invest Appalachia, a social investment fund built by and for the people of Appalachia. Originally from Hazard, Kentucky, Baylen brings experience working as an economic development and social impact practitioner. He is passionate about utilizing strategic communications and storytelling, that's a common thread, to shift outdated narratives of Appalachia. Baylen is co-founder of Lige Clarke Liberation Fund, supporting LGBTQ advocacy in Eastern Kentucky, and he holds a BA in International Affairs and an MSc in Development Practice. The guy is really incredible. Baylen, share a little bit about yourself and building loving communities.
Thanks. Hey folks, how's it going? So good to be here with you all today. as Charles said, I'm Baylen Campbell. I am based in and originally from Hazard, a small town in the coalfields of eastern Kentucky. I am a first-generation college graduate. I was raised Baptist. I'm the son of a contractor, so I've been thinking about how things are built and connected and where the strengths are and weaknesses are and trying to understand how all of our systems work pretty much my whole life. I'm gay, and I identify as a proud son of Appalachia. Professionally, I have somehow found myself in cahoots with an intersection of nonprofits and different initiatives, all with Appalachia in its name. It's really confusing, even for me. I co-founded Appalachians for Appalachia, or A4A, which is an advocacy organization working to advance civic engagement across the region. Studio Appalachia, which is a rural design studio based out of the University of Kentucky's College of Design. The Lige Clarke Liberation Fund, working to support Fabulachans across the region. And while I wear many hats, I am the Director of Community Impact with Invest Appalachia, which is a blended capital impact investing platform, working to move money into the hills and hollers in West Virginia and the Appalachian counties of Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Ohio. Because these are the communities almost across the entire nation that have historically had the least amount of investment, but the most extraction taken from them. And today, our financial systems inherently associate rurality with risk. So, in short, I try to advance economic justice during the day, and I too stir up good trouble in my free time. I come to this work really having embraced trying to take leaps of faith throughout my life. Growing up in eastern Kentucky, a place of rich natural beauty, also has a lot of challenges. The challenges related to the extraction of our natural resources, multi-generational poverty. We are the testing ground for the opioid epidemic. For many Appalachian folks, we were consistently told growing up that if we ever wanted to do something with ourselves, that we had to leave the place we call home. Growing up gay in eastern Kentucky, I also always felt a little bit out of place and grappled with the concept of ever being able to have a really full and fulfilling life there. So after high school, I left. I went about as far as I could go. A leap of faith to go abroad for a year ended up turning into 4 in an undergraduate degree, which ended up turning into 2 more years abroad and a master's degree, and some other rambling around. Honestly, if you commit to really finding cheap flights and will put your entire life into 2 suitcases for 6 years, you can cover a decent amount of ground. But eventually I found myself in New York working in philanthropy, a space that I didn't really understand or know or really have a desire to be in. But in the course of that, I was able to meet a broad cross-section of movement leaders, faith leaders, and organizers with the sole purpose of my job trying to advance how we build those bridges and connect those divides. In the midst of the pandemic, I decided to take one more leap of faith, and I moved home. And I'll say it was really the scariest leap I think I've ever taken. It kind of went against everything I was, in a lot that was instilled in me growing up. Also, weird anxieties and fears that I hadn't really felt since I was like a closeted teenager, all bubbling to the surface. But I'm happy to say that it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Over the last 3.5 years, I've come to see firsthand what it means to be in and a part of a loving community. And the first thing you need to know is that takes time. So 10-ish years ago, people in Hazard came together to say, hey, we want to revitalize our downtown. This has been historically the heart of our community, but it's been hollowed out with the rise of big box stores, the downturn of the economy, and out-migration. So through a lot of organizing, convening, organizing community events, the community itself has sparked transformative change. I'm very proud to say that since the beginning of the pandemic, downtown Hazard now has over 45 new small businesses in the downtown area alone. Yeah. The majority of which are women, minority, and LGBTQ-led businesses, social enterprises, and nonprofits. The last 3.5 years have also tested the faith of the community. In July 2022, we had historic flooding that devastated countless counties in eastern Kentucky, impacting thousands of homes, small businesses, and destroying essential infrastructure. At a time when floodwaters had literally ripped apart the concrete bridges that connected us, it was very clear that the real bonds and bridges that bring mountain people together were firmly in place. Within days, an old department store turned into a donation and distribution center. Friends who were nurses and doctors and medical professionals took to the hills on foot to get access to communities that were now inaccessible by road to give essential emergency care and vaccines. Nonprofit organizations like Kane Kitchen and Cowan Community Center fed thousands of meals a day, provided childcare and essential services for impacted folks. That kind of devastation, witnessing it, juxtaposed with the unquantifiable resilience and love that we saw, was like having your heart broken and put back together at the same time. Contrary to negative stereotypes of Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia as backwards, rednecks, uneducated, a monolith of white conservatism, what we saw during the flood was a multi-racial, diverse community coming together to support each other. That's who mountain people are, from my purview. Quick question for the audience. Does anybody know the roots of the term redneck? Give me a shout. Battle of Blair. Battle of Blair. In 1921, the Battle of Blair Mountain occurred in Logan County, West Virginia. The battle was the largest labor uprising in the history of the United States, where a coalition of coal miners of different backgrounds, who spoke different languages and practiced different faiths, came together to protest the inhumane working condition and wages that they were living in. The miners wore a red bandana around their necks as a symbol of solidarity and protest. From my lived experience, I see Appalachia as a real beacon of hope. Historically, the region's people and resources have fueled the growth of America's economy, and I believe it's going to have to play a pivotal part in saving the country as well. Today, organizations like mine, the Housing Development Alliance, Homes Inc., the Foundation for Appalachian Kentucky, and many others are working to mobilize the recovery effort, which will take time. But since moving back to Kentucky, we've seen organizations like Hood to the Holler, Surge, and A4A work together to mobilize folks across the state. And I think that is no better represented than in the recent governor's race, where we literally saw a bridge spanning from Letcher County to Louisville. Yeah, come on. I often say the biggest part of my job, regardless of what hat I'm wearing, is to connect folks. But simply connecting is not enough. The social and relational bridges required to cultivate real loving communities, bridges that can weather any flood, require intentionality and a steadfast commitment to ensure that everyone, regardless of who they love, where they come from, or how they worship, we have to require that everyone has a seat at the table. And we have to move our resources and spend our time to ensure that those folks, that our entire community can write its own next chapter. I believe we're seeing that in Kentucky. I'm seeing it build across Appalachia. And while there's a lot of work to be done, when we talk about loving communities and building bridges, bridging those divides, the best place to start is in your own backyard. And when someone tells you no, just because it's always been that way, just remember, that's not a valid answer. Thanks.
All right, so there's a little clock up here.
I went over.
And I know we are a little bit further along in time. It's been a healthy discussion. I want to make sure that we're okay. Y'all gonna kick us out of here? Okay. Well, I want to set the stage for this next person. And I'm going to do it by centering some of the things that Baylen was talking about. Change that we want to see, the changes that we want to see, they start within us. They come from our story. They come from our testimony. From the space of community, they come from the people. Those who are living in the struggle are most equipped to be the leaders of the solutions to those struggles. And when we're looking to build communities and create these loving communities and bridge divides, you do it by centering those who are closest to the pain and building from there. And when you do that, as Baylen had mentioned, we can repair things. We can restore what has been broken. So the idea of showing love and kindness isn't just an exercise, it's actually the path forward. This person has been a giant for our city, for our state, for the country in building a path forward. And I know we're going to have a break and go into panel. But I want to just take this quick liberty to thank Judge Sadiqa Reynolds. Thank you for being a beacon for so many people. I don't think I've ever had a chance to do this to you. So I'm just taking that privilege because you are the proof that the change we're fighting for is actually possible. I would read Sadiqa's bio, but y'all know her story. I still call her judge because that's just, going up in law school and seeing people rise to that level. I'm like, I got to put respect on your name forevermore. The judge has told all of us about the trauma of her lived experience, the pain that she has suffered, the love that she has fought for herself and for her family, and then turned it into love for this city. And then picked up the reins at the Louisville Urban League and turned it into this magnet for the country. They had the audacity to think beyond what was and say that we can fight for justice in a city that has been one of the most segregated in the country. If I keep talking about you, I'm gonna get emotional. And not only has she devoted to making Louisville better, she's now taking that work nationally as CEO of Perception Institute, dedicating to addressing structural inequity by taking bias and flipping it on its ear and unpacking the things that have driven us apart so that we can create healthy communities. So what better person, other than the hood to the holler guy, but what better person to really help bring this point home of creating loving communities and bridging divides. So, Judge, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bring it up. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
All right, yeah, the magic is happening. They want to keep the show going. So, Judge, and if you want to come up here, and look, everybody's been coming to the podium since I've been up here. But if you could share a little bit about your work now, a little.
Okay.
Try, you know.
I will think I'm to stay here. Okay.
Look, you're the queen.
No, I'm not that. I thank you all. It is really a pleasure to be here with you all. And the work that I do now is at Perception Institute. It's an organization based in New York. We're trying to work on the thing that I've spent my life working on, ending racism, ending bias, all of those things. It's an action-oriented think tank, and that is the work that we do. We've had the privilege of coming here and working in Louisville, and we do it in a lot of other places. And, you know, I think with everything that is happening in our country, in our city, and in this world, what we have to have, and I appreciate these speakers so much, and Charles, you are wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the work that you do. I don't think we can say enough about the need for truth. We do not really care to examine the root cause of any of our pain because it is so uncomfortable, and people with power seem to constantly edit us, and it doesn't affect the change that we deserve. What I love about what you said, and when you had the storms, people came together. People come together when they see hurt, and especially if you are sitting here, all of a sudden I can see your humanity because you are sitting beside me, because I see you and I understand that you are somebody's child, somebody's friend, somebody's lover. But if I don't see you, if I don't see that in you, somehow we seem to allow people to suffer. We have dehumanized each other so much that we are in fact engaged in the dehumanization of ourselves. And so I believe, thank you. I believe that the God that I serve and my whole purpose for living is to help us see each other, see the dignity in one another. That is what Perception Institute is about. It is about how do we talk about one another? How do we see each other? How can I make sure that you can be heard and that I can be heard and that there is space for us, not just space to be, but space to actually change things into what they should be. There should be more rooms like this. There should be more spaces where we listen to each other and we talk about what is the cause of the thing. And we change it. It is not enough to have the discussion, say what it is, and then do nothing to change it. You have power, you have privilege, and you do, whether you believe it or not, if you are in this room, if we are on this stage, we have power, we have privilege, but what do we do with it? What is different because you exist? What is better because you woke up this morning? What are we changing? We should be ashamed that there is a place in Kentucky where anybody is telling Charles Booker not to go. What is the matter with us? So I think, well, that's all, right? You said, I don't even know what the question was, but I know, last thing I will say is, I am having a hard time in my life right now finding a place where I belong. Because everywhere I turn, there is dishonesty. If we do not decide to tell the truth, if we do not fight against editing what people learn in schools, if we do not fight for the rights of everyone, we are going to destroy ourselves. You cannot exist in freedom if I am not free. And I cannot exist in freedom if you are not free. We are very, very, very connected. And John Powell of Othering and Belonging Institute was just here, and he said children are connected to their mothers through the umbilical cord. We are literally born connected to another human being. There is no way to disconnect. And there is no way for me to preserve my humanity and disregard yours. That is the work.
Okay, it works. So we were supposed to have a break.
Yes, call it in. Say, let's have the music interlude.
Okay, well, we're going to give you a break because we've been laying it on. So we'll have a musical interlude and take a brief break.
Hi everyone, this is Nathan Salzberg again from the Alan Lomax Archive, introducing another piece of music I hope you'll find compelling and also relevant to the theme of this segment of the festival. The old congregational singing tradition of lining out was once widespread across Britain and America. Established in England in the 17th century, the practice involved a song leader or precentor intoning a psalm or hymn line by line, which the congregation would then sing back to him. In this way, worshipers, most of whom functionally illiterate, both of the written word and of musical notation, could be intimately involved in the worship service. It was a radically democratic approach to music making, and it sounded like it. There was nothing of the melodic unison or rhythmic lockstep that would be established when the praise singing was taken out of pews and moved into choir lofts, primarily by church fathers who found the lining out tradition too anarchic for their tastes. Today, however, lining hymns are increasingly rare and are sung primarily in the old regular and primitive Baptist churches of Central Appalachia, the Gaelic-speaking Presbyterian churches of Scotland's Western Isles, and a smattering of African American congregations primarily in the South. In 2004, a group of Gaelic singers from the Hebridean Isle of Lewis joined a Black Presbyterian choir from Madison, Alabama at the Celtic Connections Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland, for a concert showcasing each tradition's approaches to lining out. They ended their presentation with a collaboration on Amazing Grace, which we'll hear now, in the democratic spirit of creating loving communities and bridging divides.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
All right, well, I'm still letting that settle in my spirit. I don't know about you. You've heard some very, I think, critical perspectives on different aspects of building and creating loving communities and bridging divides. So we're going to take a little bit of time and go into a little bit of dialogue. I'm going to throw some questions at you and hopefully get your wheel spinning as you listen. Because one of the things that the judge mentioned in the end that I think was really important is the necessity to speak the truth. Creating community and bridging divides, that type of work, it's not easy work. And if you're not doing it right, if you're not uncomfortable, if you're not pushing yourself. And so, since we have a few minutes, and Ken, I'll start with you and we can just work our way down. What does building a loving community look like for you?
Yeah. I think that, as I mentioned, those little acts of love and service, and it always starts with showing up. The way that I got to where I am in the music scene is just by going to other people's shows and supporting them, buying a ticket and just sitting and watching and really absorbing and respecting that space they had on stage. And then I would talk to them and ask, okay, well, how did you get this gig? And they'd say, oh, well, the bar manager. So then I would go talk to them. But more to get to know why they did what they did, why they're passionate about it. There's a bar manager locally that I still go and watch him compete in cocktail competitions because that's where his passion is. And so I think building loving community starts with loving and supporting and showing up for those people. Again, not because you're expecting something from them or expecting an elevation, but just because they have passion and they deserve space for that passion.
Thank you, baby.
Yeah, I think, especially nowadays when it feels like we're living in almost like a post-rational society, very much what you're talking about. It is the simple things, it's the small things. The way we build loving communities is to really center and challenge ourselves to think about how we call folks in rather than the constant barrage that we hear of calling folks out and wedging divides between us, because we've all always been here. We're not going anywhere. So call folks in and challenge yourself, challenge our own biases to understand where they're coming from, and sit in the weight of challenges. Find the gray space where we are disagreeing, embrace that discomfort, because conflict's gonna occur, but if we have conflict with the shared intention of progress, then that's where the real magic happens.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I would say that we need to get to know one another. We need to see each other for who we are. We need to think of ourselves as sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, and see yourself in that other person. We really have to find a way to see the humanity in others. And I think that is the way to bridge the divide, to understand even where we don't agree on everything. Can I work with the things that we do agree on and find and move from there? Because if I can work with you on these few things, we disagree on all of this, but we agree on this. And so let's just work on these things. And while we're working on these things, we are getting to know each other. And then suddenly your perspective is changing and mine is changing, because the truth has never changed, right? So we just keep on, and eventually maybe the truth, you understand it different, I understand it different. And so I think that's important for us, to get to know one another and to really see the humanity in every person that we are exposed to. And certainly those we have power over.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may piggyback on something that Baylen said, I think that calling in is so important for preserving loving communities. I think that those of you who may be familiar with my work musically, locally, have heard like, oh yeah, Kiana's always calling out that abuser, or calling out that, and not because I like to stir the pot or I want to, this, that, but because I know that our community is better than that. Mm-hmm. And anytime you notice harm within your communities, call that person in. Accountability is so important. Mm-hmm. And ask, what is it that's going on? Why am I hearing this? Why are we going through it? And how can we move through it and move out of it so that our community is welcoming and loving and healthy again? I think that is so important.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think just one last thing.
Please.
Sometimes that pot needs stirred.
Hey.
Like if you're gonna cook something good, you gotta stir the pot, but you gotta know when and do it with care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you stir the pot, you should know how to cook.
Yeah.
Because everybody, we need to make sure we are equipped with what we need and to be able to make space for one another, to be able to say, here is my area of expertise and here is where I fall short, and sister, brother, other, whoever, can you help me? We have to make sure we are doing that because there are many of us in this country, in this city, and in this world, we cannot afford not to have our best putting their foot forward. And so we need to make sure that once we stir that pot, we understand how to cook, what's gonna happen, how do we serve, how does everybody eat, whatever the situation is. And that forethought, that ability, it's not enough to just, this conversation is so important and this work is so important. And time is of the essence. And I hope that we sense the urgency. And so what is required of us, I think, is to be in community and conversation and making sure that we are listening to our elders and also to younger people, and that we are getting the best of this information and we are gathering it and we are doing something with it, and that we have a plan, strategy.
Look, if we would say we were at church, this is a sanctuary, I would say touch your neighbor and say, stir the pot.
Stir the pot.
But know how to cook.
Amen.
Learn how to cook.
That's bumper sticker.
Yes, it is. Somebody put that on the shirt. Now, I wanna be respectful of time. So look, you all throw something at me because otherwise I want to pose one sort of quick hitter question. I want our family here to be able to walk away with something actionable for themselves. And so if you could tell the audience one thing that would aid them in their journey of creating a loving community and bridging divides. And I'll start. The one thing that I would encourage you to do is listen. And when you listen, look to be uncomfortable and take the time to pull in a perspective that you might not have thought was valid. It's hard to build with somebody if you can't listen to them. And I passed legislation with folks who probably would have told my granddad to go around the back to vote. But we found common bonds by listening. So.
Yeah. Oof. Show up, really, compassionately. And if you're showing up for a single person or a group of people even, talk to them about that work and why they create it and why you care about it, and connect with them. And really make space and give space to people the same way you would want them to give space to you.
Agreed on both of those. I think also something that I'm coming to learn is to rest, to take time to take care of yourself, because you can't, especially folks who are involved in movement work and organizing, and when you feel like you're doing work where you're hitting a wall day after day, you have to be able to rest.
Yeah.
because it's a long game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say thank you for that rest. I like that. Grace. Give yourself grace. Find a way to give others grace. Sometimes people you love are going to make mistakes. Look at the entire track record. Like, grace, I think, is so important for us in every interaction. I think sometimes we're getting to a place where we assume the worst in everybody, and most people don't deserve that. Some certainly do, and they have proven that, honestly. I mean, let's just be real about it. But I think grace for ourselves is a really important thing. And then, since I didn't get up and talk, I'm going to take just another minute, because who cares? Invite me back or not. I don't care. I once saw Maya Angelou on Oprah, and she said that she was lying in her bed and she heard the door opening. And then she heard these footsteps coming towards her. And she leaned up in the bed and she reached over to the nightstand and she pulled out a gun. And she said, "Is this what you are willing to die doing?" And then she heard the footsteps going the other way, and then the door. I think there are too many of us that have not asked ourselves, is this the thing I am willing to die doing? If it is not, do something else.
Yeah.
God created you for a purpose. Find your thing. Find your thing, because the world needs you. The world needs you, and the world needs you now. And that means if you're 14 or 12 or 11 or 17 or 35 or 55 or 75, if you are breathing, the world needs you. I need you. I've spent my whole life waiting for you. And so find the thing you are willing to die doing.